Jane's life changed after she got into an accident and was betrayed by the person she loved most. Her boyfriend had abandoned her at her weakest moment, leaving her to face medical bills, looming debts, and the unbearable truth of his betrayal. But fate had other plans. What happens when Moon-O, her former college bully, a man she had once despised for his arrogance, shows up in her life? What happens when their bond grows and Moon-O's support transforms Jane, not just her life, but her very self into someone new, different? Together, they would face heartbreak, uncover deadly secrets, and confront the man who tried to destroy her. What started as survival would soon become a story of justice, transformation, and undeniable passion. The question now was whether Jane would recover. It was how far she would go to reclaim her life, and whether her ex could survive the reckoning that awaited him. Before we start, if you're new here, please subscribe and hit that like button to support this video so others can see it too. Now buckle up, because this will be a bumpy ride. Jane's foot hit the brake pedal of her car, but it won't stop. Not resistance, not a slow failure, nothing. She slammed it again and again. Her whole leg driving down with everything she had, and the car just kept moving, kept rolling faster down the slope of Birchwood Avenue, the entire world completely unbothered by the fact that she was losing control at 40 miles an hour with nowhere to go. No, no, no. The words came out broken, half prayer, half panic, and her hands were white on the steering wheel, arms shaking with the effort of holding the car in its lane even as it gathered speed. And then she saw her. A woman with one hand on a stroller, head dipped toward her phone, crossing the street at the bottom of the slope in that slow, distracted way people cross streets when they believe nothing bad is coming. She hadn't looked up yet. She didn't see Jane. And Jane had about 2 seconds to stop herself from hitting the lady. She didn't think. There was no room for thought. Her eyes darted to the tree on the right, a thick oak tree. Jane yanked the wheel towards the tree, just in time not to hit the woman. She had just enough time to squeeze her eyes shut. And then everything was noise, and glass and black. Jane came back to herself slowly, like surfacing through dark water. The ceiling was white, something beeped beside her. Her left arm was encased in something heavy, and her ribs. The moment she tried to draw a full breath, her ribs reminded her they existed in the most unpleasant way possible. She was in a hospital. She turned her head slowly, and the effort of even that small movement made the room tilt, and she had to wait for it to settle before she could focus. When she did, she found Ivy, her best friend. Ivy was asleep in the chair beside the bed, still wearing what looked like yesterday's clothes. She looked like she had cried hard at some point, and then simply run out and hadn't had the energy to wipe the evidence away. "Ivy," Jane said with barely enough strength. Ivy jerked awake like she'd been waiting for it, her head snapping up, and when she saw Jane's eyes open and focused, she was out of the chair and at the bedside in a second, both hands grabbing Jane's hand. "Oh God," her voice was wrecked. "Oh God, Jane, you're awake, you're actually." She stopped, pressed her lips together hard, took a breath through her nose, tried to hold herself steady but failed at it somewhat. "I've been sitting here for 3 days. 3 days, Jane. Do you know what that does to a person?" 3 days, Jane repeated slowly. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." Ivy's thumb moved back and forth over Jane's knuckles. "The doctors said you'd be fine eventually, but eventually is a horrible word when your best friend is lying in a hospital bed, not moving." Jane looked at the ceiling, felt herself coming back online piece by piece, the accident, the tree, the brake that hadn't worked. Then she remembered what she had been doing that morning. Work. She had an early delivery to dispatch. "Michael," she said. "Where's Michael?" At the mention of Mitchell, Jane's boyfriend, Ivy's face went pale. "Ivy," Jane's voice had changed. Something in her chest was already pulling tight. "Where is Mitchell?" Ivy looked up. Her eyes were bright, and Jane understood, with a drop in her stomach, that they were bright because she was fighting very hard not to cry again. "He asked me to tell you something," Ivy said. "He said he's sorry, but he's ending things. Jane's heart shattered in her ribs. That's not, she stopped, started again. That doesn't make sense. Ivy said nothing, which was its own answer. He wouldn't do that. Jane heard her own voice lifting, heard the edge of something desperate getting into it and couldn't stop it. Ivy, he wouldn't do that. We've been together for 3 years. He told me last month that we were going to get married soon. What about She stopped. What about the loans? Jane had signed every document. One after another, over 18 months, because Michael's business needed a push, needed capital to get off the ground. And she had believed him with her whole chest because that is what you do when you love someone. You bet on them. She had bet everything, every loan she could get her name on, all of it under her credit because his was already damaged, all of it her name and her liability and her future on the line. Is he coming? Jane whispered. Ivy shook her head. Jane turned her face toward the window. She didn't cry. She wanted to. She tried to find the tears and they weren't there yet. They were somewhere further back, waiting until the shock cleared enough to let them through. The loans didn't wait for her to be ready. She came home from the hospital to an apartment that felt different, and she couldn't tell at first whether the difference was in the apartment or in her. She walked through it slowly, touching surfaces, the kitchen counter, the back of the couch, like she was checking if everything was still real. Michael's things were gone, not all of them, just enough. His jacket that used to hang by the door, the charger he kept beside the bed, the stupid succulent on the windowsill that she had actually been the one to water but he had claimed as his. She sat on the couch. She sat there for what might have been an hour. The first letter from the loan company arrived 2 weeks later. Then another. The interest wasn't sleeping and neither were the creditors, and she had no income because she hadn't been able to work, and she was barely eating once a day because the idea of doing the work of hunger seemed like too much. She called Michael's number the first week, disconnected. She drove to his apartment in the second week, but there was a new name on the mailbox. She called his mother in the third week, and his mother picked up and said carefully that she hadn't heard from him in some time, which Jane did not believe at all. He was gone, completely, like was never there. The depression settled in and made itself comfortable. Mornings were the hardest. She would open her eyes and there would be about 3 seconds before her brain updated her on the situation, and those 3 seconds were almost peaceful, almost fine. And then the update would arrive and she would just lie there in the weight of it while the alarm beeped and beeped and beeped. Ivy came on a Tuesday evening with food and a face that meant she was about to say something Jane wouldn't want to hear. She sat across from Jane at the kitchen table and put both hands flat on the surface in that way she did when she was building up to something real. I know you're hurting, Ivy said. Jane stared at the table. Jane, look at me. She looked. I know you're in it. I know it feels like there's no floor, but those loans are not going to disappear, and the only way out of this is forward, not around it, not under it. She leaned in slightly. You're a dispatch writer. You're good at it, Jane. You're one of the fastest in the city. You have a skill, but you need your car. Jane said nothing. Your car is still in impound. It needs to be looked at and fixed, and then you need to get back on the road. I know it's terrifying. The accident, I know. But sitting in this apartment is not grief, Jane. It's just rotting, and you are not someone who rots. Something in Jane's face moved, just slightly. Okay, she said finally. The next day, Jane took her broken car to a mechanic shop. She was wearing work clothes because she had no other mode anymore. She had forgotten how to dress for anything that wasn't function. Her hair was pulled back. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had been through something and was standing back up mostly by refusing to lie back down. She was halfway to the front desk when she heard her name. Jane. She turned. He was standing near the far end of the forecourt, next to a black car with the hood up, one hand resting on the frame of it, and he looked exactly the same as she remembered from college in the way that people can look exactly the same while also being entirely different. Same face. But his eyes were older, and the way he was looking at her was different. Lee Muno. She hadn't thought about Moon-O since she dropped out of college, which was many years ago. He had been her bully. Not the kind of bully who steals from you or pours trash on you. He was the kind that teased her when she came to lecture on the back of her shirt, the type that mocked her most when she panicked on the stage. They never liked each other back then. But then her parents had died, one after the other, and she had to leave, and the rivalry between them was over before she ever resolved it. He was surprised to see her too. But he noticed the way she looked different, more tired and wrecked. He was looking at her the way you look at someone you're worried about and trying not to let the worry show, but not quite succeeding. She hated it. "Moon-O," she said flatly. "Jane," he straightened from the car. "I didn't know you were." "I need my car fixed," she said. "That's why I'm here. Who do I speak to?" She didn't want nothing else to do with him. She didn't want to even catch up on how life had been. She just wanted to leave before he saw just how messed up she was. "You can speak to me. I'm the head here," he answered. She came back the next day to check on progress. She was sitting in the waiting area with her arms folded and her jaw doing the thing it did when she was holding herself very carefully together. Then she heard footsteps and looked up to find Moon-O with 2 cups of coffee, extending one toward. She looked at it, then at him. "I didn't ask for that." "I know," he said, and sat down beside her even though he knew he wasn't welcomed to. She took the coffee. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You're going to regardless," she said. The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. "When did you last have brake problems, before the accident?" Jane frowned. "I didn't, the brakes were fine, they just stopped working." "That's what I want to talk to you about." He sat down across from her. "Jane," his voice was quieter now. "Your brake line was cut. Someone cut off your brake intentionally." She went still. "I had one of my guys double check, and then I checked myself." He held her gaze, not looking away, not softening it with anything. Jane thought about the night before the accident. She had come home exhausted from a double shift, barely keeping her eyes open. Michael was at the apartment. She hadn't expected him, but he had a key and came in by himself. He had kissed her cheek and asked if he could borrow her car, said he needed to pick something up. She had handed him the keys without thinking twice because she was so tired. He had come back an hour later, kissed her forehead, have her back the keys and told her to sleep. Then in the morning, she had gotten in the car and driven to work, and at the bottom of Birchwood Avenue the brakes had disappeared and there, on the road, was the woman with a stroller. Jane's chest cracked open as it all came dawning on her. The insurance policy. The thought arrived like ice water. Mitchell had brought an insurance 18 months ago. He had told her, "We should have proper coverage, babe. I'm the only family you have and you're on the road every day. Anything could happen." She believed him and went ahead to sign the insurance because it was practical, and because she loved him, and because being named as each other's beneficiary had felt romantic. But he was the only person who would collect. She stood up suddenly. The room felt too small. The walls were closing in on her. She walked past Moon-O and through the yard and out into the open air. Then she stood on the pavement in the flat morning sun with her hand pressed over her mouth and breathed through her nose, slowly. Because if she stopped managing her breathing, she was not confident she would manage anything else. Michael had borrowed her car that night. The next morning, the brakes were cut, and he was her beneficiary. She wanted the equation to not add up. She stood in the sun and checked the math 3 times, and it kept adding up the same way. Behind her, she heard footsteps, and then Moon-O was beside her, at-handing in the sun with her while she put herself back together, which took several minutes and happened without any help from him and also somehow because of him. After that day, Moon-O was simply part of her routine. It just happened gradually. He brought her food, proper warm homemade food that he cooked himself. It was either rice and stew in sealed containers that were still hot when they reached her, or it was soup on the morning it rained, and she came in soaked and shivering. She complained about the food the first time, told him she was capable of feeding herself, "Thank you." "I know," he said, and brought it again the next day. By the 3rd time, she stopped complaining and just ate, because the food was good and she was hungrier than she'd been admitting to herself. He didn't give her that much of a choice also. Then on Thursday, she got a delivery. It was a dress. The day before, she had gone to check her car with a tear in the sleeve of her shirt that she didn't notice. The next morning, there was a paper bag at the front desk, with her name on it in handwriting she didn't recognize yet. Inside was a dress. It was a simple dress, but it was feminine, pretty, and could literally be worn anywhere. She held it up and went to find Moon-O, who she suspected was the culprit. Moon-O. Yes, ma'am. Did you leave this? A pause. Then he rolled out from under the car on the board, looked at the dress in her hands, looked at her face, and said, I noticed the tear on your shirt yesterday. You're welcome. You can't just buy me clothes. I allowed you being food for me, but clothes is where I draw the line. Why not? He asked. Because it's strange, she blurted out. Is it? I don't see anything wrong. I'm just trying to help an old college friend who's going through a lot to not notice the tear on her shirt. She would have told him she wasn't his friend and that she wasn't going through a lot, but it was the way he spoke like he was being sincere that stopped her. Does it fit? He asked. It did fit. She had no earthly idea how. She hadn't told him her size, hadn't mentioned it, hadn't given him any information at all, and yet the dress in her hands was exactly right. When she got home, she tried it on immediately. It was lovely. But she already decided to herself she won't accept any more gifts from Moon-O. Just because it was years ago didn't mean he had changed from the mischievous person he used to be. Ivy saw it the moment she walked in without even knocking. That's new, she said, eyes moving over it. Moon-O got it for me. Ivy set down her bag very slowly. The mechanic who's fixing your car. Jane nodded. But it's nothing, Ivy. He claims he's doing it as a friend. Jane, I'm going to say this once and then I'll let you pretend I didn't say it. She leaned against the counter. That man likes you, like actually likes you. The food, the coffee, the sitting with you, the clothes. He's being kind, Jane interrupted. Men who are just being kind don't memorize your clothing size. Jane poured herself a glass of water and looked at the window. Even if that's true, she said quietly, I'm in no condition for anything. I'm still paying off someone else's debts. I'm still me, Ivy, whoever that is right now. Ivy was quiet for a moment. I think you're more than you're giving yourself credit for, she said. I think he probably knows that too. Jane said nothing, but she kept the dress anyway. The next day, which was Monday, after the weekend, Jane had gone to the mechanic shop again, and this time, Moon-O had made her laugh for the first time. They had been talking about their old college days, and he kept reminding her of all the silly things they fought over. She looked at him for a moment. This man she had resented for 3 years of her life, for being better than her, yet bullying her at the slightest opportunity. And something cracked open in her chest, and the laugh came out. Moon-O watched her laugh and didn't say anything, but the corner of his mouth lifted up. He looked proud of himself. She got herself back under control, cleared her throat. I don't know why that was funny. It was true, he said. True things are often funny. She went home that evening and Ivy looked at her face and said, Something happened, you look different. You look a little bit happier. Nothing happened, Jane said at first. But Ivy wasn't giving up. What happened? She asked. Jane put her bag down. Moon-O made me laugh. Ivy pointed at her. I knew it. But Jane was too tired to try and convince her that nothing was going on between her and Moon-O, so she just went to bed. Jane started noticing things about him. The way he listened. Not the performative listening people do. He listened like what you were saying was the only thing happening. She would be mid-sentence and glance up and find him watching her with this focused, unhurried attention, and it always made her lose her thread for exactly 1 second before she found it again. The way he noticed things, small things. The day she came in with a headache she hadn't mentioned, and he appeared after 20 minutes with painkillers and water. Or is it the morning when she seemed more tightly wounded than usual? She'd gotten another loan letter that morning, terse and pointed, and he changed the playlist in the shop without comment, something slower and softer, and she had sat in the waiting area and felt her shoulders drop half an inch and been unreasonably grateful. The way he was careful with her, like he understood, without being told, that she was a person who needed to find her own footing. She told him about her parents one afternoon while they had lunch together. She hadn't planned to. "My dad died first," she said. "I was 19, and then my mum died 7 months later. I had to leave school right after," she said. "You probably didn't even notice." "I noticed," he said quietly. She glanced at him. He was looking at her, but something in his face was different. "You knew I dropped out, but you never said anything." "I didn't know what to say." He paused. "I'm still not sure I do, but I noticed." "I think that was when everything started going wrong," she said. "Not just because of the money or leaving school, but because I was so alone. And then Michael was there, and he was warm and he was present, and I just..." She stopped. "You needed someone," Moon-oh said. "I needed someone," she agreed, "and I picked the wrong one." "You're not alone now," he finally said after a bit of silence. She looked at him. He was already looking at her, not with pity, not with performance, with that same steady, direct gaze that had been unraveling something in her, thread by thread, for days now. She looked away first, which was new. She had never been the one to look away first. "Have dinner with me," he said. She kept looking at the away. "Why would I?" "Because I want to have dinner with you." "Moon-oh," she called quietly. "Jane," he called softly. She turned to look at him again. She thought about everything he had done the past few days. The food, the dress, the way he had stood beside her on the pavement while she held herself together after finding out her ex-boyfriend had tried to kill her. She thought about how she had driven to this mechanic shop 2 weeks ago barely functional, and somewhere in the weeks since, without even knowing, she had started functioning again. "One dinner," she finally agreed. Something moved in his eyes, relief, maybe, underneath the composure. Genuine relief. He took her somewhere quiet. Just a small, warm restaurant where the lighting was low, and the food arrived like it had been made with actual consideration, and the table was tucked into a corner that felt separate from everything. She wore the pretty dress he had gotten her. He wore a dark shirt, sleeves pushed up, looking more of a gentle man. They drank and talked like two people who had been being careful around each other for weeks and had finally decided, mutually and wordlessly, to stop being careful. She found out that he had found mechanics interesting since childhood. His grandfather had a shop. He would spend summers there, hands always dirty, and he described it with a warmth in his voice she hadn't heard him use before, something underneath the composure that was close to love. She told him about dispatch writing. How she'd come to it out of necessity, and then discovered she was genuinely good at it. The way the city opened up when you knew its roads. How she sometimes took longer routes just because she liked the feeling of driving. She talked about her parents more than she'd talked about them in years. He asked questions, and she found herself pulling up memories she'd packed away and finding they still had color in them. Her mother's laugh. Her father's hands, always slightly ink-stained because he read 3 newspapers every morning. The way the house had smelled. She looked at the table when she was done talking and realized her face was wet. She hadn't noticed the tears coming. She touched her cheek, mildly alarmed, like she was surprised her body had done something without permission. Moon-oh didn't say anything. He just looked at her steadily, and there was something in his expression that made her look down. "Sorry," she said. "Don't apologize," he said. "I didn't mean to." "Jane," he said her name simply. "Don't apologize." She nodded and took a breath. She realized it wasn't the usual heavy breath, but lighter now, like she had lifted a load off her chest just by opening up to him. When she glanced at her phone to check the time, the shock of the number made her straighten in her seat. 3 hours. 3 hours had passed, and she had not once thought about the ceiling of her apartment or the loan letters or the insurance policy. When they were about to leave, they stood on the restaurant's pavement, and Moon-oh asked her a question. "Do you want revenge?" She looked up at him. Whatever she had expected, it wasn't that. On Michael, she asked. Yes, he answered. She almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so unexpected, so direct. Moon, there's nothing to be done. He's gone. He covered all his tracks that it's almost like he never existed. I've already tried searching. Let me worry about that, he said simply. I'm asking if you want it. She looked at him and thought about what Michael had taken. Not just the money, not just the loans, her trust, her willingness to believe someone, her ability to think about the future without it immediately exhausting her. She thought about waking up in that hospital bed to an empty chair and a breakup delivered through her best friend. Yes, she said quietly. I want it more than anything. Moon held her gaze for a moment, and then he leaned forward slowly, no rush, no pressure, giving her all the room in the world, and kissed her. It was brief, warm, so careful it almost hurt. When he pulled back, she realized she had leaned in without deciding to, that her whole body had made that decision before she'd been consulted. The next morning, Moon took her to a very popular hairstylist. Not the kind she was used to. She sat in the chair and looked at herself in the mirror, the way she had been avoiding doing for weeks, and let herself actually look. She looked tired, deeply, structurally tired, like fatigue had been living in her face long enough to start calling it home. The stylist looked at her hair, then at her face, then back at her hair and said, "What do we want?" Jane thought about it. "Different," she said. "Something different." 2 hours later, she stood up, and reflection looked like her but adjusted, like someone had turned a dial that had been sitting wrong for too long and finally found the right setting. Her shoulders, she noticed, were sitting differently. Moon was waiting outside. He looked up when she came through the door, and the composure completely slipped off his face. "Well," she said. "You look like the Jane I know," he said. It was the exact right thing she wanted to hear. She wanted to run striped off that poor girl who was deceived by her ex. She wanted to look like the Jane she was before she ever met Mitchell. "Come on," Moon said. "We have more to do." Next stop was the gym. Moon had told her that one way to get your spark back that always worked was hitting the gym. He trained with her every time, which helped. There was something about not being alone in the effort, about having someone match your pace, push when you flagged, ease off when you'd actually reached your limit, and not just your comfort zone. The first week she could barely finish a session, but by the third week she was finishing and then wanting 10 more minutes. She started sleeping without having to work at it, which had not been true since before the accident. She started waking up and the ceiling was just a ceiling, not a map of everything she'd lost. She started looking forward to mornings. She had forgotten that was possible. Ivy came to the apartment one evening about a month into all of it, and stood in the doorway of Jane's room, and just looked at her for a long, quiet moment. "You look like you again," she said. Jane looked at her hands. "I feel like me again, or a different version of me. Better, maybe." Ivy came and sat on the bed. "I know it's only been a month and some weeks since Mitchell shattered your heart, but I just want to let you know that it's okay to fall in love again. I can see you trying to hold yourself from doing so. Moon is obviously a good man." Jane was quiet for a second before looking away. "He's hiding something," she said finally. "About himself, his life. There are gaps he doesn't fill in and I keep noticing them." "Have you asked?" "No." "Why not?" Jane pressed her lips together. "Because right now what we have is," she paused, "not enough to pry into his life. And I don't want to find out something that changes everything I've believed due far." Ivy looked at her for a long moment. "Whatever it is," she said, "I don't think it changes the man who's been buying you food and making you laugh for weeks." Jane said nothing. But later that night, she lay in bed and thought about it, all those moments where she'd ask something casual about his life, and he'd completely dodge the question and change the topic. She trusted him, fully, solidly trusted him. Whatever was in the gaps, she believed it didn't change what was between them. She told herself that and fell asleep. 3 days later, Moon had come to get her by himself. "Get dressed," he said. "Something nice, you have an hour." She looked at him. Where are we going? You'll see. She studied his face. There was something different in him today. The usual composure was there, but it was holding something underneath it, something coiled and deliberate, like he had been building to this specific day for a very long time and had finally arrived at it. She got up without asking again. The dress was dark green, floor length, with a cut that made her stand differently in it, taller, more deliberate. He had given it to her, and she had been saving it without knowing what for, the way you save things you sense belong to a moment you haven't reached yet. She did her makeup slowly, carefully, not rushing it. When she looked in the mirror, the woman looking back was not the woman who had woken up alone in a hospital bed and come home to an empty apartment and learned that the person she had loved had tried to end her life. That woman was still in there, she knew. You don't go through something like that and leave it completely behind. When she walked out, Moon-oh was standing by the door in a dark suit, perfectly fitted, and when he looked up and saw her, he just looked at her with his whole face open and unguarded in a way she had seen a handful of times and treasured each one. "Let's go to this mystery place of yours that you don't want me to know," she said. He smiled. It's a surprise. The place was bright and crowded and expensive. There was music underneath the conversation, crystal glasses, laughter from people. Jane moved through it beside Moon-oh and noticed, again, the thing she had been noticing more and more, the way the room adjusted when he entered it. Not dramatically, not a parting of crowds, just a subtle shift. People noticed him. They looked and then looked away, and some of them looked back, like they were trying to place something. She pushes it away, though. She had been pushing signs away for 2 months. And then, across the room by the bar, she saw Michael. She almost thought it was an hallucination. He was laughing. He was laughing at something a man beside him had said, completely at ease in his skin, in his suit, in this room. He looked like someone who had never done anything he was ashamed of. Everything in Jane went very still. She was aware of her own breathing, aware of the glass in her hand and the weight of it, the realness of it, aware of Moon-oh beside her. He took her arm and linked it with his. "I've got you," he said quietly. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin exactly 1 centimeter. "I know," she said. Michael's eyes moved through the room the way they do at parties, scanning the guests, and then they landed on her and stopped. She watched it happen in real time. The recognition, the shock, the way his gaze moved over her, and something that might, in other circumstances, have been admiration moved through his face before the rest of it arrived, before the calculation, and beneath the calculation was something else that was unmistakable and quickly buried. Fear. Mitchell crossed the room with the kind of social confidence of a man who believed he could talk his way out of anything. "Jane," he smiled. She had once loved that smile. Now it looked like a closed door. "I didn't expect to see you here." His eyes moved over her, and whatever he saw was clearly not what he had expected, because the smile flickered. "You look different, I know," she interrupted. He blinked, then looked at Moon-oh. "And this is her boyfriend," Moon-oh said. Simple, no performance. Just a fact stated by someone who had no need to establish territory, because he had never felt the need to establish anything. Michael's jaw shifted. "Right." He looked back at Jane. "It might be better if you two leave." "I have something for you," Moon-oh said instead, not intimidated by him at all. "It's a birthday gift." He reached inside his jacket and produced a small envelope that Jane had no idea of. In fact, she was still surprised by what was happening. How had Moon-oh found Mitchell? How did he know today was Michael's birthday and he was celebrating it? Moon-oh extended the envelope. Michael looked at it for a moment, something moving behind his eyes, and then took it, opened it, unfolded the papers inside. Jane watched his face go completely pale. His hands were completely still. His expression stopped moving. He stood there, holding the letter. It was a forensic report, the fingerprint analysis extracted from the brake line from Jane's car. His name was at the bottom where the identification was confirmed, and then silence surrounded the three of them. Mitchell looked up. "This isn't," he started. The prints are yours, Moon-O said. The report is dated the evening you borrowed her car. The analysis is from 2 independent forensic labs. He paused. I was thorough. You don't know what you're saying. Michael, Jane's voice came out quieter. I know you cut the brakes. I know you were listed as my beneficiary. I know exactly what you tried to do. She let that sit for a moment. And I know why you left when it didn't work. You left so only me would pay the loans back. The people nearest to them had gone quiet. She could feel the attention even without looking. This is my birthday, Michael said to Moon-O, low and urgent. Who do you think you are to come in here and think you can ruin it? Me, Moon-O asked. My name is Moon-O, he said. I'm the CEO of OH Group. The ripple was immediate. Someone nearby said something in a low voice. Someone else's glass stopped moving. A small but obvious adjustment happened in the room, the way the air changes before weather arrives. Jane heard it. OH Group. It was a global name she had seen in financial news without connecting it to anything personal. One of the most biggest companies in South Korea, owned by the youngest billionaire in the country. She turned to look at him. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Michael with the particular steadiness of someone who has chosen this moment carefully and is not going to be moved from it. Michael looked like he was about to piss himself. He looked like he regretted every word he said to Moon-O and would take it back if given the opportunity. The evidence goes to the appropriate authorities regardless, Moon-O said. The only variable is how this next part goes. Something broke in Michael. She saw it break, saw the performance collapse all at once. He sank to his knees. It happened so fast that Jane stepped back. Jane! His voice was wrecked, loud and desperate, aware of every person in the room, yet not caring. Please, I'll pay it back, all of it, I swear to God. I was desperate, the business was. I was drowning, Jane, I wasn't thinking, please. He was looking up at her with wet eyes, and she thought, I loved this person. She thought, I signed my name on pieces of paper for this person. I sat in a hospital bed asking where he was. Don't let him do this, Jane. Please, I'll go to prison. Jane looked down at him. She felt not triumph, not the satisfaction she might have expected. Something that was less about him and more about herself. The recognition that she was standing upright, fully upright, in the room where he had hoped she would never be able to stand. You should have thought about that, she said, before you cut my brakes and almost murdered me. Across the room, Michael's mother had a hand pressed over her mouth. His closest friends were still and silent. Someone had already picked up their phone, recording the whole thing. 20 minutes later, the police arrived. Moon-O had arranged that too. Of course he had. Weeks ago, on a pavement after a first kiss, he had asked her if she wanted revenge, and the moment she said yes, he had started building and planning all this behind her back. As Mitchell was dragged away, Jane and Moon-High followed, not willing to answer the guests' questions. Moon-O took her to his penthouse. The whole drive was in silence. It was the first time he was bringing her here, and when the elevator opened directly into it, she understood, more concretely than she had in the event space, what Moon-O had been keeping from her. The space was vast and understated, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city in every direction. Art on the walls chosen with actual knowledge. A space that said power without raising its voice. She stood at the window and looked at the city below, the full weight of the distance between where she was standing and where she had come from. Moon-O's reflection appeared behind hers in the glass, watching her carefully. How long have you had it? She said. The company. I inherited it midway through sophomore year, he said. My grandfather died and left it to me. I was 20. She turned from the window. You never said anything, even in college. Why? I stepped back from the public face of it. I wanted to finish the degree without, he paused, searching for the right words. Without people treating me like a company, like a net worth and a headline. Something moved in his expression. I just wanted to be Moon-O. And the mechanic shop, she asked. I have interests in many things. The shop is quieter than most, so I chose to spend my free time there. Free time. They had only bonded because he was on his free time. She looked at him, this man who had come into her life and was supposed to fix her car. You planned all of this, she said, from the night we kissed. Before that, he said quietly, the moment I found the break line, I started. Why? He held her gaze. Because it was you, he said. Because no one was coming for you and someone should have been. She crossed the room and kissed him properly this time, not the careful, tentative thing from the pavement. His arms came around her, and he kissed her back with a warmth and intention that was entirely him, entirely consistent with every version of him she had come to know. She pulled back slightly and looked at him, at his face that she had watched for 2 months, learning to read every small movement, the composure and what lived beneath it. I love you, she said. Something moved through his face that she had never seen there before. Jane. She kissed him again before he could finish. They stayed in each other's arms while the city spun quietly, indifferent and glittering, and entirely unaware of what was happening in the windows above it. In the morning, Moon-O reached for Jane beside him and found an empty space. He sat up immediately. Her shoes were gone from the door. Her dress was gone from the chair. The room was exactly as it had been before she came. Nothing but a pillow beside him and a strange, single white envelope. He picked it up. The handwriting was hers. He recognized it immediately. Moon-O. I'm not good at goodbyes, so I'll be quick. I love you. I think you know that. I meant it when I said it, and I mean it now. I love you, and that's exactly why I'm writing this letter instead of staying. Last night I stood at your window and looked at your city, and I thought about what I have to offer someone like you. I'm still paying off loans taken out in my name for a man who tried to kill me. I don't have a career yet. I have a job. I am still, in most ways that matter to the world you live in, nothing. You are South Korea's youngest billionaire. You are the owner of OH Group. You are something and I am nothing. You would never ask me to be more than I am. I know that. But I would ask it of myself every single day, and eventually it would change how I hold myself when I'm standing next to you. I am not of your league at all. I don't deserve you. So I'm leaving, not because I want to, but because it's the right thing, even if it is the hardest. Take care of yourself. Don't try to reach me because I've made it impossible. At the end of the day, I'll be okay. That was all. Moon-O read it once, twice, and for the third time. Then he squeezed the letter and stared at the floor. Then he picked up his phone with speed and called a number. Find Jane for me. Search everywhere and find her for me. Down Part 2 is coming. And trust me, Moon-O is not the kind of man who reads a letter and sits still. If this story moved something in you, subscribe so you're first when Part 2 drops. Hit like so more people find Jane and Moon-O. And comment below. Was Jane right to leave? Or did she just make the biggest mistake of her life? Watch out for Part 2 and see you next time.